now I'd like to start with this show, and I'm very proud of this particular show because I have with me Tom Althouse, who wrote The Matrix. And I have here the original screenplay by the Copyright Office of the United States. All right, there it is. Okay, wonderful. And this, when he originally wrote it, he called it the Immortals. And now the Hollywood thieves came along and took his script and made 3 movies from it. And I think they're in the process of making 2 more, right?
That's right.
Yeah, and they're in the process of making 2 more, all using his script. And Tom went to, tried taking this to court out in California, and, you know, as Steve knows and I know, and anybody who's really dealt with these courts, it was a corrupt kangaroo court, and they tried to say that there was nothing in common in his screenplay. Yeah, in his screenplay, but there's 190 common things from his screenplay in The Matrix. And from what Tom has told me, they just took pieces here and there and they chopped it up. They didn't follow his story completely. And that's why a lot of The Matrix, you're not really sure what was going on, or it doesn't really explain itself well. But I'm going to turn it over to Tom because Tom can explain all this much, much better than I can. And here's Tom Althouse, the actual originator of the Immortals, which became The Matrix. And what was the other one?
It became the Matrix Trilogy, so the different Matrixes.
The Matrix Trilogy,
and
yeah.
Now it's called Altered Carbon. Altered Carbon. Now on Netflix.
Yeah. Okay, so why don't you tell us your story there, Tom?
All right. Well, first of all, this came out of a feeling of writing for the future, trying to write something that maybe would lift audiences, lift what's the ceiling on what's possible in film script writing and things like that in the industry. We were told that basically Hollywood was bankrupt for ideas. It's back during Highlander and things like that. And so what I wanted to do was introduce some concepts that had maybe never been seen before. And lo and behold, that's exactly what Lorenzo D. Bonaventura latched onto. When I was invited to pitch it in Long Island at Lenny Coco's home, who's Lenny Coco and the Chimes, I was invited up to his home to pitch it. So he put me on the phone with Lorenzo D. Bonaventura, who is the gentleman who's the executive of Warner Brothers, who was known for discovering new writing talent and such like that. In fact, after the pitch session and after he said, it's revolutionary, we're making this, and he said, you know, I've made it, he has a Wikipedia entry where he says that he shepherded and discovered the Matrix story and that he's one of the few that understands it. And in that aspect, he is telling the truth. That's right, because I pitched the entire thing to him. So this script that Joe has been holding up here is actually predating The Matrix. And in that, there is 190 matchups. And what they did was they lifted what they thought was cool from the work. And the Wachowskis didn't really write a script about it. In fact, their attorneys are on tape saying they have no working drafts. And so what they did was they lifted every image they thought was cool, including the field of pods, where the one, you know, Neo's writhing in pain, the squiddies, the train station scene with a little girl being pushed forward where the parents can't follow, the jacks to the neck, which the Wachowskis said they wanted to do for real in articles, and even the identical figures at the end, the little girl pointing the sun. That's all my work, and it's all here in this document provided by the specialist and director of the Copyright Office. Now, what's interesting is they lifted the images and made a 600-page storyboard of images they thought were cool, and then basically chop-shopped it like you would a Porsche into a different formation, and it didn't hold together. It didn't hold water. And what we learned later was when they shot this piece, there was a 20-foot rule that if you were in 20 feet range of the Wachowskis, you're fired. They didn't want anyone to see this in their hands. Attorneys even for the other side told me this was in the hands, being shot and used on set, off record they said this, and that that was the rule. So they used the storyboard, the visual storyboard, with that, which is still, you can access online apparently or buy, and the script in hand to try to complete the story. It ended up near the end where they were arguing over how to end it, and even critics talk about it being one of the 11th worst sequels of all time, because such as the Oracle and Neo get arguing and debating and just ramble. And so because of that rambling, they weren't sure how to end it. And that's what shows up as convoluted material. It doesn't make sense. It doesn't connect. And people have still to the date wonder what it actually means. And what's interesting is while that debate goes on, they talk openly in interviews now about how the entire crew and cast was basically saying, blow up the Matrix. Now, this is interesting. As the author, I say they should have. Because once you chop shop this piece, it no longer holds together with the ending I have. And so they wanted to keep the exact ending. So they have exactly my ending, which is the little girl at the train station. They've got the identical figures facing off the crater. They've got the one going in the crater. A pulse wave comes out and turns the earth green again. And then you got the little girl renewed to life. She comes back and hugs the oracle and points to the sun. Well, that's my scenes to the T. So rather than blowing it up, they kept my ending. But that did not do them a service because it doesn't make any sense. But since we hold the copyright, we can make the film, even though they'll throw a bucket of injunctions at us saying there's no similarities, or saying there's similarities at that point. Once we make this, audiences could come with a checklist and see 190 matchups, including those things such as the train station scene, Jack's the neck and such, and see how the ending actually ties together. Finally, it will make sense to audiences who've been wondering for so long, what does it actually mean? So basically that's it for the ground story. There's other elements too, such as the Wachowskis had a penchant for clowning. And what happened was in this piece right here, The Matrix, which is the first installment they didn't think it would become anything famous. So basically my film was used to save careers. Keanu Reeves' career, the Wachowskis' career. They said in articles they were washed up as writers in Hollywood. The only way they could save face or remain is if they got to direct, and they called it the science project. There was no title being passed around The Matrix at that time in 95. In fact, my script, I'm told, was being codenamed different things. Science Project was one of those names. And so what's interesting is if you look at the actual Copyright Office, and this director and specialist stepped in and helped me, you find Dino Laurentiis, who actually launched the career of the Wachowskis. What he does is he copyrights my title, The Immortals, all right? So he copyrights my title, and 1996, he copyrights it. And then all subsequent titles that might be applied to it, to which the writers who they give it to steal might pick, right? Because they're still deciding who was going to do it. The first pick to take this work was the Heidi Chronicles writer, the playwright, not a screenwriter. She was slated to take this work under her credit, a Jewish writer from New York, who was very successful. And instead, the Wachowskis whined and fussed so much that they gave it to the Wachowskis through Joel Silver. And what's interesting, that's when they apply the title The Matrix, in actually 1996. But prior to that, Dino Laurentiis has copyrighted the title, but no body of work. Now, this alerts the Copyright Office that something's very wrong. How can you copyright a title of work with no body of work? That's not supposed to be done. That alerted them that there's some kind of insight or something's wrong, rotten in Denmark. So they're like, something's wrong. So that's why they helped me out and beat them to the punch, and got me this screenplay, which is certified, gold sealed, bolted to prove that it's my work that precedes The Matrix. So there really wouldn't be any intellectual argument against me being the author at this point. There's no copyright on The Matrix because they hadn't picked that title yet. So Dino Laurentiis copyrights The Immortals. When I surface in 1996 in Hollywood and I start to apply a new copyright onto my work, then Dino Laurentiis does something remarkable. In July 1996, he takes his name off of the piece, The Immortals title, without a body of work, and takes the Laurentiis Film Company off of it also, De Laurentiis Films. What he does is they then place it in the ownership of two of the leading Jewish banking firms or investment firms in Hollywood, and a Netherlands library, if I'm not mistaken. So now we're to believe that the Matrix story, the actual copyright, the Immortal story, is actually the property and creation of two of the biggest investment firms in Hollywood and a library in Netherlands. Well, that's pretty amazing work for a corporation. But what happens is we understand now that that was done so that everybody had kind of a take on what this meant in Hollywood. Different studios wanted it. Disney, Warner Brothers, Universal. So what they did in Sony too. So this way, through the investment firms, anybody could be given it. It's claimed to be the property of the investing firm. So you settle all arguments and fights over it, the stolen property, with a den of thieves, by giving it to whoever you want. The investment firm profits by giving it to them and being paid and lending money to do it, and everybody does their own take on the work. And so there is no innocence in Hollywood on this piece. Disney, Sony, Warner Brothers, Universal, all are involved in this. And Miramax Films are all involved in different versions of the theft and different takes on it. Bonaventura actually says nobody in Hollywood understands this piece except him. Only one besides him. And so that's because I pitched it directly to him. And he asked questions, I answered them at that pitch session at Lenny Coco's home. And Lenny Coco's actually on tape with us saying, you were here. My wife remembers you being here. My granddaughter remembers you here, pitching it in May of 1993. So really, we've got them. We've got the proof. It's not a matter of proving it. We've got that. But if we did it through the Hollywood courts, they provide your own attorneys. They provide the judge that's going to handle it. And it's going to be thrown. It's just going to be tossed out.
Which they did.
That's right. That's right.
Which they did. Just to fill in a little bit, they had a court case out there, and the judge out there said that there was nothing common in Tom's work to the Matrix, and
that's right.
There's 190 scenes, elements of his work in the Matrix,
including the actual ending. All the sequences, the scenes are exactly identical, and the little girl at the train station and all that stuff. Yeah,
but also the fact that we've been doing a lot of shows on law, and we've been telling people how corrupt our judicial system is. Anybody these days pretty much can buy a judge. And we got people, Hollywood people, that they got lots of money, and it's obvious that this judge was in their pockets. That's coming from me, not necessarily from Tom, but I've dealt with courts so much, and they find ways of keeping your proof out of it. I wanted to bring you into that. Tell how the judge didn't allow you to actually get due process and all the things he did to stifle your proof of this.
Well, they provided their own attorney to approach me and say he wanted to represent me out of the blue. And I didn't even know who this man was. He comes forward and says his name's Anthony Rankin on Maui. And he actually had a suspended license in California. But he was classmates with lead attorney Linda Burrow of the Warner Brothers firm Caldwell, Leslie & Proctor. And so what happens is this gentleman approaches me, says how he's going to put $100,000 into this case, and made an offer too good to refuse. Said he's going to get a copyright attorney expert, and he's going to handle this. Justice needs to be done. He's a fan of The Matrix. He got goosebumps to meet me. So he says all these things and says he wants to represent me. And at the same time, I'm there with my wife, hearing this. And it turns out that he was actually the landlord of my wife. She didn't tell me that. So my wife and both the attorney both came to me at the same time. I marry Becca, and I find out that this has been her landlord, and everything's in place just to rip this off and make sure that nothing comes of it. So evidence is disappearing from the house. I got no support from the wife, and suddenly I find out that she's actually the product of Mike Lang of Miramax Films. And as soon as our case is thrown, she goes off to live with him. So it was like I was just a job. So that's how they get down to the nitty-gritty. If your piece is worth billions, they provide their own staff to represent you. And that way they can alter things and make sure there's no depositions, no discovery, no initial disclosures. We actually have on tape Linda Burrow and her staff at my deposition, because they didn't do depositions on the other side. They only did them of me. And on that tape, you'll hear her say that they have no working drafts and that it's a moot point to ask for anything because they have nothing to give. While in the public, they said they have everything. And so that's how they handle it. No disclosures, no due process, no discovery. And then you end up with a judge that's been picked and appointed, who is, you find out was appointed by Bush and the religious right, to make sure he renders conservative decisions. Well, of course he's going to rule against you. So he made a ruling which is like a page and a half, and said in a summation where he took it apart where there's no arguments given, and said there's not one thing. Summary judgment. But no, summations when you take it on your own and no one can argue. The judge takes it on their own as if to ask advice of others. He can have like 30 days to do it, and they make a decision without anybody having any input. So it's a way to hide and bury yourself and get away with it. So he goes into summation and rules there's not one similarity. And it's what's really amazing about this is he in the summary judgment, in Sophia Stewart's summary judgment, the lady that claims to be the mother of the Matrix, it's like 36 pages long. In mine, it's a page and a half, and he actually has a statement. It's not worth going into how there's no matchups aren't there. We're not going to delve into that, basically. We're not going to talk about how the matchups don't work. If he was actually going to talk about the matchups, which would be the proper process to do as a judge, he would have had to address the jacks in the back of the neck, the squiddies, the little girl at the train station scene. He'd have to address the identical figures at the end pointing at the sun. He'd have to address Zion and the people there, the EMT device where you turn the key and it blows the tunnels in a one-shot deal. He'd have to address all those. So he didn't do it. He got around that by saying, I don't want to discuss it. It's not worth it. And that's a crazy way to do a summation. He didn't even sign the order. So he knew he was wrong. But the thing is that the Wachowskis themselves said, we want to do jacks in the back of the neck for real in 1995. Well, if they actually wrote this piece, then first of all, why would they be saying that? And then in 1995, why would they be saying they're washed up as writers, and articles you can see online, we're washed up as writers, we have to pack our bags, quote, pack our bags, because the only way we'll make it in Hollywood is we get a piece to direct. And what they were peddling was Carnivore and Plastic Man. Plastic Man's about a gentleman who defecates radioactive material, and Carnivore's about a person who eats rich people. Because their Bible, basically, if you allow me to say, was how I made $1 million in Hollywood without spending a dime. It's about low-budget films and how to make a fortune off of low-budget films because you're guaranteed a return through insurance and investors. So make them flop, like the producers. And so why would they take on this? Springtime with Hitler is a very good example. Yeah. And, why would you make this piece that is so overloaded budget-wise? My piece, I didn't even think it would ever be made. It was so, production values were off the charts if you were actually going to shoot this properly. That was pre-green screen. And so the claim to fame that Wachowskis really had to win the WB suits over was, we'll get it in under budget. And in the interview they had in 1995, I think it was Wireless, in 1995 they do an interview saying, we're washed up as writers, we're not going to make it in Hollywood, we have to pack our bags unless we get to direct a project. And in an interview, in that one interview, they're asked, well, what do you have? What do you have since after Bound? And they say, we have Carnivore and Plastic Man. Then there's actually on the transcript of the interview, you see a pause written in brackets, pause. And then they say, but we're hoped to be given the science project. See, until someone had rights to this stolen work through Bonaventura and Joe Silver and such and Mike Lang, no one was allowed to name it. It was called code names. And that's why Dean Laurentiis actually copyrighted my title. Once it's given to the Wachowskis, they run immediately out in 1995 to buy the mansion in Hollywood and all that stuff, and they call it The Matrix. So the first time you see the Matrix name applied is 1996. But there's never been a copyright applied. We actually hold that.
Right, and no place in the Copyright Office is there a copyright of The Matrix as it came out as a movie.
Right.
They didn't have a screenplay, and if they didn't have a screenplay and they didn't copyright it, and the only copyright is Tom's Immortals, which they changed the name to Matrix and used, and they cut and chopped scenes from it. They didn't go from the beginning through the whole screenplay to the end. What they did was they picked specific scenes that they thought, oh, this is really cool, we'll put this in. Mm-hmm. And then they'd leave out some of the middle and then say, oh, we like this scene, and we'll put it in. And so that's why The Matrix don't hold together. I watched it, all three versions of it, and I liked a lot of the story, but I kept saying, I don't understand. It don't really fit together. I noticed that when I watched it, that there was big gaps in it. And if you read Tom's, it fills in all those gaps. And when I'm trying to hook up Tom right now with a good friend of mine who's a copyright lawyer. So Tom can take this into court here in New York, where it's not controlled by the Hollywood crowd. And hopefully Tom will win the fact that they plagiarized his stuff, and he should be compensated monetarily for that. And then with the money that he makes from that, he hopes to actually make the movie The Immortals. Mm-hmm. You want to take it from there, Tom?
Sure. And we got attorneys suggesting we make the real life movie. They said that's where they really get the goose flesh too. So make this piece, and people could come with a checklist and get the 190 things there. That'll make Judge Klausner, who was the judge that was brought in to throw this, look a little green, because it's like just one similarity kills his situation and brings us to court. And the interesting thing is, because of the provided attorney Anthony Rankin that had the suspended license and kept throwing the deadlines and throwing the case, the Matrix hasn't been claimed yet. I've never had a suit on the Matrix. And with that idea that in that interrogation scene, there's my high school, there's my birthday, there's my name is Neo, Thomas A., there's my dad's name, John A., as Neo's father, is in the first graphic they put in that interrogation scene, is right there with the Smith flipping it. Knowing that, then they've got a hot spot they have to deal with. The only testimony we ever received from the Wachowskis was that they said that they're not at fault. It's not their fault those inserts in my personal biography, including my high school, Central West High, is listed as Neo's on that graphic for a split second. They say it's Michelle McGahey and Owen Patterson that put it in there. What's interesting is Michelle McGahey and Owen Patterson are respectively the art directing department and the production department. And they put Michelle McGahey's name exactly as it is as Neo's mom in that stat sheet, and Owen Patterson exactly as his name as the other school, to complete the joke. And so that's where they're really caught. They're caught not denying those entries are there in my personal bio, life, my high school, my name, my birthday, my dad's name, but they're actually saying they're blaming it on their own staff. Well, that puts them in quite a precarious situation. Then the Animatrix that comes later.
What did they do that for? Just the thrill of being caught?
I was contacted by a person in this Warner Brothers story department, and they wanted to be anonymous. It was a gentleman. And he's the one who alerted me. I would never have known these inserts were in here. If anybody goes to the interrogation scene, freeze frame that flipped open folder and look at that stat sheet. And there's my personal bio information. And what's interesting is I was told that they hated me, basically. The Wachowskis hate you. They don't understand the work. They're just trying to save their careers and want to be famous. And so they're bored doing your project. They don't want to do this. They hate you for writing it. They hate you that they don't understand it. So it was basically a way, I understand, to slap my face, first of all, but also I was never supposed to know it was there. Suzanne Bolgen, keep the project interesting, is what Susanna Bolgen said in an article, and I think it was New Zealand Herald. She's the graphic designer. And she said that anything in for a split second in the films by the Wachowskis was there for their entertainment, to keep the project interesting, and for their eyes only. They didn't expect anyone to ever see it. So if I was not contacted by Warner Brother personnel, you would not be able to see what I can see now, and you can see when you freeze frame this film. Freeze frame the interrogation scene, Smith lays down the folder, freeze it as soon as he opens it. You'll see how fast that goes. And right there is going to be my name, Thomas A. as Neo, John A., my dad's name as Neo's dad. July 22nd is up there as an allusion to my birthday, and then you've got my high school, Central West High, as my high school. Now what's interesting is I recently signed up for USAA, the government insurance, great deal. So I'm signed up, and they're doing a search of my background. So the representative is searching my background. He says, I've only can find verification of you from a 1996 entry, which says your birthday is July 22nd. We were stunned. My parents and I were stunned, because July 22nd is how they have me listed in the Matrix as my birthday on that graphic, as you'll see. Now in Animatrix, they correct it in 2003. That's 1999. In 2003, they changed my birthday to the correct birthday, July 2nd. They actually put it in here. So in 2003, when they have my full script and they are shooting the second and third installment, they also shoot the Animatrix. Now, the reason they shoot the Animatrix is they wanted to be clever. They wanted to, as the gentleman who called me said, use up the rest of the story, is what Joel Silver's quoted as saying at the end of the shooting. We hope we used up the rest of the story. Well, if you actually wrote it, you would know. But the thing is that, yeah, you would think, right? So the thing is with Animatrix, what they did was these are all shorts of the ideas that they lifted that they thought were cool from the screenplay right here, that is copyrighted with director and specialist providing, preceding Matrix. Anything they thought was cool that they didn't get to put in the 3 installments in the trilogy, they hodgepodged and pieced into the Animatrix, right? So that's why you have these shorts, to show that Wachowskis are clever and every element was taken and lifted and used. But what they also did was a segment called the detective story on here. And if you go to the detective story, you're going to find my name across the screen, Tom Park Althouse, right across the screen. And it lines up like this, where the letters line up perfectly in line. And they took an antique shop and turned it into an antique house in the graphic, and then put my names across, making T's, O's, M's, and all that kind of stuff, and using Mopar for a reversal where you have Tom one way and Park the other with a K on the end of it. And so what's interesting is also in that detective story, where I think the verbiage in the story, you hear the gentleman talking like film noir, and he's basically saying like you can look and you won't find it, which is great. Thanks, taught me further. But the thing is that in the detective story, you also have a clock face fill the screen. So a big clock face fills the screen in the Animatrix detective story. You can find it. What's interesting is in Hollywood, just like they use the phone numbers with a 555 prefix, right? That's the standard joke in the industry. That's what they do, copyright rules.
What's that?
They put 555 for phone numbers. It's kind of comical. Like you'll have an owner, someone in a film go, okay, my number's 555. That's a standard thing. You'll see on buses in the shot 555. That's a standard thing for any kind of phone numbers. Now, for clocks in the industry, the joke is to go with the smiling hands, 10 after 10. So you'll see it in stores, the smiling faces makes them look happy and nice. So 10 after 10 would be what clocks are mostly set at in the industry, just like 555 for phone numbers. Now, in Animatrix, they don't do that. So they want to get the birthday right. So in 2003, they have a clock face, and it has 7, 2, and then second hand's 1 second before the 60, 59. And what's interesting is that's my exact birthday. And you can't force the hands to take that position. If you're doing basically 10 after 7, you can't get the 7 exactly on the 7, but they force the hands to do it in the graphic. So you have 7, 2, 59, my exact birthday. And for those that get into the mystery of all these things, if you're a fan of the Matrix, they added an alarm hand, a red alarm hand, and that alarm hand is pointed at the 4 past the 4. Now, what's interesting is what I was told from the inside on this, because I would never have found this on my own. They told me that a 4, red 4 means assassination. They're really into numerology too. And also that I was 44 in 2003. Now, in Matrix, what they do, because they knew that as an actor, I'd said when I talked to Bonaventura and pitched the screenplay, I said I don't talk about my age. And he was joking. We were joking about that. So what does the Wachowskis do? Put my age in each graphic. So in the Matrix, what they do is in the column that you'll see in that, if anyone freeze frames that shot, please do, you'll see the high school, Center West High, my birthday, all that stuff. And then in the column, it says TA 4099. And TA was 40 in 1999, see? And then in Animatrix, on the clock face, they throw in 44. I was 44 in 2003.
Were you supposed to be killed then?
Yes, I was supposed to be taken out. The word was that I was going to be destroyed. I have tapes, actually, of what we call middle people, who are people that work for their organization that are posing that arrangement might be made and posing arrangements that might be done. Not settlements, but arrangements. Settlements implicate they did something wrong. Arrangements mean they have their hands clean and you just had a deal made. So in the arrangement talk, they let me know that they want to destroy me. There will never be settlements, that the powers that are over them want to destroy me. And I have 2 different tapes of 2 different individuals telling me that. So that means that I would be erased. And that's why
Why didn't you get erased?
I've had attempts on my life. I have.
Why do you think you're here?
I have to give it to Providence at this point. I mean, what's interesting, it raises the bridge to the other element. The Wachowskis claimed that they're shy and didn't want to do interviews. What's interesting is, when The Matrix first came out, they started doing galas and they did interviews, okay? So it wasn't a case of shyness. They were out there media hounds at first. But what happened was smart viewers and fans started saying, well, there seems to be a Christian element in the screenplay. The Wachowskis didn't want to talk about that. In fact, there's a transcript of a interview, one of the early interviews in galas, and there's long line of questioning. And a lot of times the Wachowskis are, I don't know, I'm not sure, we'll leave it up to audiences to decide. And then the question came up, there seems to be Christianity in this piece. Can you elaborate on that? And lo and behold, Larry, who seems to be the lead of the duo now, would say, I think that's all the time we have. I think we should stop there. Actually cut it cold. They did not want to talk about Christianity, right? But yes, it's in there. It's in there. Of course we know it's in there. But that's why they then said, Joel Silverman says in an article, they were embarrassed to talk about it or try to explain what it meant. You're damn right. They are. And so that's why they put that thing about, wanting anonymity and reading off their scripts saying we're shy and all that kind of stuff and going like this to the camera to try to emphasize it. It was kind of sickening. But the thing is that, as they're getting awards for my work, but the thing is that, yeah, they wanted me out of the picture so they wouldn't have to look over their shoulder. So if you are a Hollywood person, one of that little chip of humanity that is controlling Hollywood, you can make more money off a screenplay than prostitution, drugs, gambling, you name it. It's the hot ticket because you're only dealing with one family. So like myself, erase me and my family and you got nothing to worry about. You made billions of dollars if the script's worth its salt. So that's why we're endangered species now. Writers are getting knocked off. And it's not a joke, and it's not conspiracy theory. It's really happening, and I'm part of it. I was warned by the inside there would be a murder-suicide, which would be staged. And we beat them to the punch. I was told they were going to insert this screenplay for 8 pages of scribbled notes at the Copyright Office. We beat them to the punch. The specialists and directors stepped in and real heroes. We beat them to the punch. So we keep beating them to the punch on everything. And in fact, they tampered with the attorney that was provided, this Anthony Rankin, who got off scot-clear, even with a suspended license. He tampered with my poor man's packet, right? And they switched it for 8 pages of scribbled notes. They had this long play they had set up, this long con, basically. And so he actually says in his emails to me and my wife at the time that the submitting attorney will have no file. He's not going to have any file. He won't have the screenplay or anything, so you don't have a case. When it turned up, the 8 pages of scripts, notes were scribbled and inserted. And so what happens is James Boyd of Norfolk, who has the tracking number, the receipt, and the actual full screenplay and story treatment and music that was submitted, right? And the letter to 4000 Warner Brother Lane, certified mail. He has the whole packet, the whole file, and he gives it to me with his testament, stamped, notarized, and everything. The thing is, they tamper with the poor man's packet, right? But what they didn't count on was that Boyd, who precedes that, had the full script and everything. So here we have Boyd, James Boyd, who's another hero in this whole story, stepping in, providing his file, showing even the receipt with the tracking number to 4000 Warner Brother Lane, which is trying to say we never received that. And then you find out that that's in June 25th, 1993. This poor man's packet was put together basically in August 1993.
Let me jump in for a second. Explain better what a poor man's packet is. You're talking some terms that the average audience don't understand.
Very good, very good. It's a cheap way to protect your work, and even copyright attorneys will advise you to do this at times. You're really looking to establish you wrote the piece when you did. It's really who wrote it first, basically, a lot in copyright law, when it's done properly without provided judges and attorneys. So what happens is, if we have a fair shot, we shouldn't have a problem at all. But a poor man's packet is I take my screenplay, I get a notary, and she notarizes it, or he notarizes it. We put it into a mailer, self-address it, mail it to myself. That vanilla folder then is sealed, left, until ever I should appear in court. And that's what writers do. It's a way to show, here's a stamp certified, yeah.
Common law copyright?
Well, it's basically a way of showing you wrote it, it hasn't been opened, that kind of thing, and here's proof that this is what was written at this date. And it's common practice with writers. It's effective unless you get an attorney provided for you that alters it. And so what happens is, in the altered packet, it actually says script enclosed, full script. You see the creases of a full script, and then it's this flimsy little 8 pages in there that are nothing. I couldn't even explain what they were. They were just scribbled notes. And so we were told they were going to switch them out of the Copyright Office for the main script. These things are on hard copy on shelves, right? Not digital. So they were going to switch it out with their insider, who had been responsible apparently for copywriting the title with no body of work for Dino Laurentiis and squad. And so what happens is the specialist and director who are on here step in and advise me and get me this original copy sealed. They said there's no fighting it. This is it. You precede the Matrix. And so they were beaten to the punch. So this whole ploy of tampering with a packet backfired and blew up in their face. Now they don't want to talk about that.
Yeah. I've spent a couple days now with Tom staying at our house, and it's been very interesting, all the facts that he's let me be aware of. And to look through this here, the script that he's got, this, which is from the Copyright Office of the United States, which proves that he wrote The Matrix before it became The Matrix. He wrote it as The Immortals, and they only took pieces,
Right.
Stuff that they thought would look good, or this, I like this scene, and they put it in, and then they skipped a bunch, and then they put in another scene that they liked. And that's why when I watched The Matrix, which I actually really liked The Matrix, but I kept, through the whole thing, kept saying, how does this line up with the last thing? It doesn't follow consistently. And,
Right. Well, I got two fun things I want to throw out. I think they might be fun for Matrix fans if you
Okay.
are watching. And it's, one of the things is this. I'm going to take the script right here, which is obviously certified by the Copyright Office, and it's predating Matrix. I'm going to open to one section right here, and I want to hold it up to the camera if it's possible. And right here, for Matrix fans, is the train station scene. Right there is the transport station, train station scene. What you have is a crowded scene. It's not supposed to be a static shot with just a little girl and her little Indian family. It's not supposed to be that. True, they can't follow her in the Matrix. They're trying to get her into a better life. That's in here. But the thing is that it's supposed to be a crowded scene. But they wanted to cut the budget, right? The real charm for the suits in Warner Brothers was that they were going to get it under budget. So they make the crowded train station scene I have here into just a static station. Didn't work very well. So if you turn the page, what you have is, there is the little girl. Now the little girl's name, as you can see on the page, or if you can see it, is Brittany. It's Brittany. And they changed it to Sati. They were very fond, had a penchant for just changing the letters around, see, and naming the author for his own work, Thomas A. as Neo. And so this woman is trying to push her little child forward into the Matrix. She'll never see her again into the program, which she thinks will be a better life, even though she doesn't know it's a corrupt society, the immortal society. And so that's what's interesting is, here's the train station scene right there. Now that's integral to the ending. Audiences need to have a satisfying ending. If you're worth your salt as a writer, they have the awe moment, I call it, where the audience goes, oh, now I get it, right? And that ending should make sense and wrap a lot of loose ends together. Well, the little girl pointing to the sunset at the end doesn't give a satisfying ending. I think many fans will agree. It doesn't. It doesn't answer any questions. It just leaves more. But in my work, you have a scene that was taken out, the best scene, I thought. That's a scene where Neo goes to see his daughter, Brittany, his daughter. They didn't like the relationship. They didn't want to do relationships like that. And so even Joel Silver talks about that. The boys didn't want to do the relationship thing or touchy-feeling and passion stuff. And so they just wanted to do really lots of violence, lots of sex. And so in my piece, you have Neo being in the pods, basically, frozen, whatever, coming back. And he's told that it's 70 years have passed, right? He's brought into the program, right, by the Smith agent, who's supposed to mentor him, even though the Smith agent wants to kill him, because, here you go, to balance the equation, which they say, they make a big deal about how to balance the equation. And the architect babbles about it, the oracle babbles about it, Neo babbles about it. Well, here's how the actual author explains it to you. I do. In my piece, to balance the equation, the idea is this: how do you get individuals in our society to give free will over to you? You have free will. How do you get them to willingly give it to you? The answer is come back as Christ. So the identical figures at the end are supposed to be the Christ figure returning, facing off the architect looking like Christ. Well, Warner Brothers didn't want that. They're Jewish. And they didn't want that, the Wachowskis, because they're atheists. So they didn't want this, right? And so they mock Christianity by doing biblical license plates, they even say. So at the ending, it's supposed to be the architect returning, looking like Christ, not expecting the real one to show up. At the crater, identical figures. We even have the scene where the palms bleed when the one is hit and looks up. They like that. They kept it. And into the crater goes the one. Out comes the pulse wave, turning the earth green, renewing the little girl from the train station to life. And then you have that exact cutaway where they keep it, where the little girl hugs, it's supposed to be Neo, and points to the sun. In fact, they said Neo shouldn't die. Tank says that in earlier episodes, right? And so instead, since they had to replace the Christ figure in mind, they put Neo in that role, put a cross on his chest, arms out to mock it. But the thing was that it was supposed to be Christ, and Neo's watching it. After the earth is renewed, he hears his daughter come back to him. Now, the reason this is an awe moment is because the scene preceding is this. Earlier in the script, Neo loses everything, the Neo character, right? I call him Jim in mine. He loses everything. He's brought back by the Smith after this accident where he's assimilated in the program. And he's told he can't see any family members. Well, his daughter is now, who was 6-year-old when he left her, is now 76 years old with Alzheimer's. I thought it was the best scene in the whole thing, very touching. And so he's told he can't see her. Of course he's going to break that rule, right? The Smith agent wants to kill him anyway because the architect doesn't want him dead because the architect feeds off of not battery power. You could hook up cows and get more battery power. It's the fact that they like the field of pods and wanted to use that scene. That's what it was in my screenplay, but they turned it to people hooked up for battery power anyway. It was a joke and even held up batteries to make the joke even worse. It's actually human conflict that fuels the architect. Because if you're an architect in an immortal program, the biggest fear you have or biggest concern would be atrophy of the mind, lack of stimulation, getting everything old and going crazy, right? And so that's in the backstory and the story treatment. So what happens is he has his agents stirring up trouble here and there, and he also knows every choice we're going to make, even though we have free will, cause and effect. And so that's part of the story. And what the architect's going to do is change that over for the pure power of worship, which needs no renewing, no whips and chains. It's just simply we're conditioned to give our free will over to Christ when Christ returns. Western civilization often is conditioned that way. So that's why he then comes back as Christ, because he purges his agents in this screenplay here, and the Wachowskis didn't know what to do of that or make of it. So they unravel the whole thread. But that's how you balance the equation. Now this story with the little girl, he comes back, he goes to the nursing home in the future, he puts his palm onto a thing to identify credit and where everybody is. He finds his little girl is the only one still survived. 76, dying of Alzheimer's in a nursing home. So he goes and sees her. He's told that she has no relatives. Why are you here? Who are you? And so he realizes he's not going to get in that way. He sneaks around, gets into her room, and there's a 76-year-old woman, his daughter, dying of Alzheimer's, looking and acting with the memory of a 6-year-old child, just as he left her. She's got burn scars on her face because the house had been firebombed, right? And so what happens later is Smith has to use the agent, or Neo has to use the agent Smith's memory or chip to download his memories, and they blend. That's what they kept in the Matrix, the blending of their feelings and ideas. And Neo has to use the memories in order to find the Cortex building and the dome, which is in my screenplay. But what's interesting is he goes to his daughter. She says, "Daddy, you missed my birthday," that kind of thing, and touches his face like a 6-year-old would. And she says, I knew you'd come back. A man pulled me out of the fire. Now, here's your setup for the awe ending where the audience goes, now I get it. Because the Neo character at this time is supposed to, as with the audience, believe that maybe the Smith pulled his daughter out of the fire. Maybe the Smith did something good after all. So there's a bittersweet conflict even more that'll stimulate the architect, right? His need for stimulation. And instead, we're going to find something out later at the moment for the awe moment. So what happens is an orderly comes in and says, "Get out of here, you're confusing her." And she says, this 76-year-old woman who's his daughter says, "Please don't leave me again, Daddy." Right? Talking to his 6-year-old. So he scoops up his 76-year-old daughter, busts by the orderly in the screenplay right here that the Copyright Office verifies, runs down the hall, is apprehended by doctors and orderlies. He looks down, she's died with a smile on her face. I still get moved. I do. I'm still choked up. And so even my friend Greg, who wrote it with me, was moved by this scene. And so he gives her over and goes out, and there's your classic picture, which was 3 people in trench coats staring him down because he broke Smith's rules. He wasn't supposed to have contact with family. That's where the image comes from for the poster. All right? And then you join him in the future, where he's lost everything, and you join the immortal society, which he's a part of. Now, at the end, here's how it works, balancing the equation. The architect is in full swing to replace power of human conflict with the pure power of worship, right? And that's why Zion is important. Zion is untainted humanity to be brought out by the oracle at the right time to see the architect come back as Christ so we can have untainted worship by pure people. That's why you have Zion. The architect allows it. The architect isn't doing 6 generations, and the Wachowskis admit now that's a mistake. He doesn't do 6 generations wondering where they've gone all of a sudden, like short-term memory loss. He knows exactly where they are and what they're for, and what the architect and the in the Matrix story, the Wachowskis claim that the architect had 6 generations of Neo and 6 generations of the Zion, but he's trying to find Zion. It doesn't make any sense, and the Wachowskis admit they're wrong on this. They shouldn't have done it. They should have kept it the way it was, 1 generation. And so what happens is you have all face, all walks down there, and the same thing. And so what happens is at the end, they screwed up everything. Everything they screwed up. In fact, there's the key in the EMT advice that I had where you turn the key to blow the tunnels, one-shot tunnel blow deal. I had that in here. Later, I thought that was stupid. Why did I put that in there? I should have had a button or something, a little more modern. Why do I have a key? What did the Wachowskis do? They put a key to turn for the one-shot EMT device in the tunnels. They kept the same thing. Dumb. They're not very bright. Look at them in interviews. They're like, after Bound, I'm going to do a good imitation, I think, of Larry Wachowski at an interview at Bound. They say, like, well, what's next? And he's like, well, we have a symbiotic relationship where we come up. That's how they talk. These guys couldn't write diaper diaries. Both of them talk that way. They're very arrogant. They're very brutal. That's why the people on set, that's why I was told this guy called me. They don't like him. They're not the class clown, fun-loving, here's the boys from, Chicago. They're actually pretty brutal, pretty nasty, pretty arrogant, pretty rotten. I know that. Yes, right. So to balance the equation, to end the story, to balance the equation, we need the pure power of worship. So out comes the oracle, brings the people out, and you have the Christ actually appear. So what happens is you have the one figure go in, the Smith character or the architect goes in, out comes the pulse wave, turn the earth green. The little girl's renewed from the train station, laughing. You've got the other girl that's actually the daughter of Neo, is supposed to be, calling to Neo, who's watched this whole event with the Christ figure and the identical figures, and then hugs him, says, we watch you, Daddy, points to the sun and says the final line they struck. That's the man that pulled me from the fire. Now the audience has the awe moment of, wait, it wasn't the Smith character rescue his daughter from the fire home. It was this Christ, pointing to the sun, representing Christ. That's your awe moment. So the Matrix, where they spent millions of dollars on, and the Wachowskis are being told, blow up the Matrix, blow up the Matrix. Instead, they said, we're going to keep this ending. Makes no sense. You can't chop my script, lift, as Joe said, every image you think is cool, chop it around like a Porsche that's been chopped up, and expect it to run smooth. It's not going to work. It's not going to be congruent. And it's fascinating that even now, their attorneys claim it's one seamless piece, but the Wachowskis and Joel Silver claim that it's meant to be three disconnected pieces. Well, that's interesting. So we have the ending where the little girl points to it. That's when you're supposed to go to black. And then we're going to have George Michael's credits praying for time and play, which we thought would fit perfectly with the script. And we had talked to George Michael, and they said yes. The opening credits were to be Arista Records' Lap of the Gods, Alan Parsons, not Rage the Machine. So Alan Parsons' Lap of the Gods, if you ever listened to that, that was to be the opening credits. Something innovative, too, occurred in this, besides all the matchups. Hollywood had never seen this before. What I did was, if you look at this script, on page 13, the credits start. Now, in 1992-93, this never occurred. You never started your credits after the film started. You always start your credits in the beginning of the film, right? But what I did, I wanted to shake it up, try something new. So after 12 pages of 12 minutes of scenes and film, you get your credits. And the idea was that... I started that. Yeah, it's right here. It's right there, certified by the director and specialist. And so that caught on with Netflix and Walking Dead, and any program you see now usually plays in first, they think it's clever, and then they roll credits. That's my work. And what's interesting, too, I did something else. I put in hints. You've got the crucifixion of Christ, you've got World War II vintage footage of stormtroopers, Hitler, all kinds of stuff in here. And the idea was put a hodgepodge of images that actually tie into the film, and audiences treat them as smart. Treat the audience as smart. Let them then see how it all ties together as the film unfolds. So give them little clues and breadcrumbs they can follow. That has become an industry standard now, especially with Warner Brothers and everybody else, and Netflix, which is partners with Mike Lang and Harvey Weinstein, Bob Weinstein. So now what they do is, like Walking Dead will show images they're going to use later in the footage, and audiences are teased and tempted to figure out how they all fit. That is from my work in 1992-93. Bonaventura during the pitch session said, this is amazing, this is revolutionary, we're making this. When a young writer is told that, you think you're done. You put your trust in them. One of the biggest film companies in Hollywood just said they're making your film. You've made it. It's that one-in-a-lifetime dream. You've made it. And instead, that's where the nightmare began. And so to save the careers of the Wachowskis, who said in their article, and fans can look this up, they're washed up in Hollywood. They got to pack their bags in 1995 because they failed. In fact, they did Assassins. Another writer had to be brought in to finish it. They wanted to sue Warner Brothers. They wanted to be out. They went all the way to the Writers Guild and were told by Writers Guild West that you had to stay in and finish your contract. And that's when they claimed they showed Joel Silver the Matrix Project? After they've been pushing Carnivore and failed at Assassins and said they had to pack their bags? Why were they pocketing the Matrix, or the Science Project as they called it, if they have to pack their bags and leave? Well, that's waiting to the last minute. And why would you show it to the film company you're fighting with and legally want to have battle with and get out of? Because they just burned you and put another writer in to finish your work. Why'd you then show your best work to them? Doesn't make any sense. And Joel Silver is actually listed as submitting my screenplay in 1994, yet he says then, that's Teresa Wayne testifying from the story department at Warner Brothers. So why is it testified that he submitted it in 1994 when they don't even name Matrix on it yet, but they have the Immortals copyrighted? And why is he saying they're submitting it in 1994 when he says that the Wachowskis first show it to him in 1995? There's all kinds of things like this happening all through this. They got so many holes, it's going to be actually a joy to bring the Matrix forward and Altered Carbon. And so as far as people wondering about statute of limitations on Matrix, I was burned, fraud in the court, provided an attorney. There's no due process. They are the ones that made sure I didn't claim Matrix, so they provided an attorney. I wanted to claim Matrix, so we're going to claim Matrix. At the same time, we're going to claim Altered Carbon, which just came out with Netflix, and who's partners with Film Tracks. Film Tracks' job is to take the Disney library, which they call the library, which is actually boxed scripts in hard copy form in a Jersey warehouse. And so that's, anyway.
We're going to end this. This is the end of part 1 of this.